You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Surely you, like me, must find yourself wondering about stories that once splashed across headlines soon vanish into ignominy. I do, anyway, so we try to stay abreast of ongoing stories once they're, ongoing. But there are so many, and the ongoing is so relentless that it's difficult, and we lose things through the cracks and the gaps and the chasms. The women's uprising in Iran a couple of years ago was one such story. Because it was born in violence, the murder in custody of a young Iranian woman for being insufficiently covered by the morality police, that's their real name. This as she quietly walked down the street. And also because the response to her death from a sadistic beating while in the hands of the morality police, these two elements alone secure the story's place as front page news. For many women, it was more than that, far more. And our guest for the conversation today, a journalist herself and an Iranian, was an eyewitness to that moment of spontaneous, flaming outrage led by women nationally and even internationally. These kinds of horror take place every day as the norm of patriarchy all across this planet. Many, if not most, if not close to all, are private, secret, intimate. Many are public and proclaimed and defended. Most are still regarded as natural, commonplace, even warranted and deserved. That this in itself is incredible strikes feminists as a rip in the very thought processes that make us human. Yet the responses to such obscene and average, everyday forms of violence against women manage to give us hope in the darkest moments, a kind of sisterhood that refuses to settle for being merely aspirational, which our guest today bore witness to. Her name is Nilo Tabrizy, and she's a video reporter for the Washington Post's visual forensics team. Before joining the Post, she worked as a video journalist at the New York Times, where she covered Iran, race, and policing, and she covered abortion access. She also was a reporter at Vice News, covering drug policy and harm reduction. Her honors and awards are many and include the Front Page Award for Online Investigative Reporting, 2022, POY 79 Award of Excellence, 2021, the Alfred I. DuPont Columbia University Award, 2016. She was educated at the University of British Columbia with a BA in Political Science and Columbia University master's degree in journalism. And she will be joining us in just a moment. But first we need to pause here for a brief break, and then I'll return with Nilo Tabrizy of Iran. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Nilo Tabrizy, Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. Good to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here with everything that you've been through. Um, and you're currently with the Washington Post, I take it. Am I
Yes,
right?
yes, I'm a reporter on the visual forensics team at the Post.
Yes, well, I'm extremely angry at Mr. Bezos these days for his yellow-bellied caving in anticipatory obedience to the Trump regime, but I'm not angry at you, and up until now I loved the Post, so there you go. But today we're going to talk about your work in Iran and the book that's forthcoming next year. Tell us about the book first, and you'll come back when the book is done and you'll tell us more. But go ahead.
I co-wrote the book with my friend Fatemeh Jamalpour. Our book is called For the Sun After Long Nights. It'll be out in September of this year. And
This this year.
yeah, September 2025.
Oh, how great!
Yeah, we've been working on it since probably November 2022. We got back in touch and started to conceive about the book. Yeah, we've been working on it this time and I'm really excited about it. So the book is told from two perspectives. Fatima and I are both Iranian women journalists, and we detail how we covered the protest movement in Iran. Fatima reporting from inside the country, me reporting from afar, and kind of how our narratives and our work intertwine. And as well, we talk about where we come from. Fatima is from Masjid Suleiman in Khuzestan. I
Mm.
am born in Iran. My family's from Tabriz. I immigrated when I was 4 to Canada. And so we have these different perspectives and kind of we combine them together to tell the full story of the movement.
That's fantastic. Because most people, of course, in the West don't know that there was a deep background to this. That not only goes back to the takeover by the mullahs, but a background from the women's movement and their resistance to this, and how that came about. And so, take us down that route, and do a little deep background.
Yeah, I mean the women's movement in Iran has been going on for a century. I mean, we can trace it back to the constitutional revolution where women were fighting for things like access to girls' education,
Right.
and fighting for so many things that are should be rights for women, right to divorce, all these things. So the women's history and activism in Iran has a rich history with a lot of important key players. But this specific uprising that started in September 2022, this latest facet of it happened after a 22-year-old Kurdish woman named Mahsa Jina Amini was killed after being detained by morality police in Tehran. But this is just one, what happened to her. I think so many of us can see ourselves in her because she, was stopped for not wearing her hijab properly, which so many of my friends and family members have been stopped by morality police before. So I think because of this and what happened to her, it created such an uprising because everyone could see themselves in her. Our sisters could be her, ourselves could be her. This is something that touched the entire country.
Yeah, and the notion, of course, of morality police itself is chilling, but the specifics of her arrest were as well. I mean, she came from a Kurdish family in a Kurdish sub-region, and but she was beaten to a bloodied pulp, and they lied about that, and there was all this mystery about what had happened to her, and what about her body, and what about with her family trying to get at the truth. And there was another young woman who was killed not long after. I mean, these atrocities have continued for women in Iran. Uh,
Absolutely. Yeah, and so many of us learned about what happened to Gina from this image of her where she was laying unconscious in a hospital bed. Her face was bruised and puffy. You know, you could see the dried blood on her ears. That image was shared and it just went viral online. And I
Yeah.
think us being able to see that, you know, it was tangibly clear that she was beaten. You know, she was beaten to death, and you know, she eventually did succumb to her injuries and died in the hospital on September 16th.
Yeah. Yeah. It riveted the world. I mean, I think something like 500 people died in Iran in the uprising. Students started it, and then it spread to um, uh, jobs and professions, and I mean, people all over were rising up, and we really, the rest of the world thought this was it now. For this would change Iran, and of course, the government came down like a sledgehammer on the demonstrators, and I have to tell you, as a feminist and an activist, it's very hard. I mean, it's extremely painful and impossible to urge other people to keep demonstrating when their price may be their lives. Um, but the truth is that it did seem to stop the demonstrations because they came down like sledgehammers. What happened in those periods? And, I mean, is there still an ongoing movement? Is there still? I remember when there was the white flag movement, or when women would take white scarves and whip them off in public places, and so this has been gelling for a long time. But where are we now?
So, I mean, just because there's no protests actively happening on the street doesn't mean that, you know, all of a sudden people are still happy with the conditions
Oh
of
no.
living under the Islamic Republic. It's just a testament to how successful the regime is at rolling out its playbook of suppression, right?
That's right.
But overwhelmingly, you know, people are not happy living under the Islamic regime. It doesn't have a mandate from the people. But I mean, I think just watching how different national uprisings have gone on in Iran over the last decade, I've been monitoring them pretty closely. Each each movement has a shift, and so I mean, for example, when there were protests about fuel subsidies a few years ago, the
Hmm.
first protest chants were very focused on how expensive fuel was, but then you know, a few days later, the protest chants that I was hearing called for the downfall of the regime. And and this kind of the gap between the issue and then calling for the downfall of the system, that gap I've observed gets shorter and shorter with each movement. So
Interesting.
yeah, so in the case of Gina's death and people rallying around her, you know, with the slogan "Zan Zendegi Azadi," which comes from the Kurdish original "Jin Jiyan Azadi," you know, almost immediately as I was watching these protests, the slogans for calling for down with the regime that came almost like right alongside with it, because what happened to her was because of the cruelty of the regime, right? So
That's right.
immediately these protests were anti-government, anti-regime. So that gap gets shorter. And I think that's an interesting thing to observe, that, you know, people will continue to demonstrate. Iranians lost their lives because they were killed by the state and various different security forces, but they still came out. And even to this day, you know, a lot of activists that I speak with say we won't go back. I have friends that go back and forth to Tehran, and they say, you know, the shift that we're seeing is we're seeing women without their hijabs in many of the city centers. That doesn't mean that the morality police has gone away and people are living
No.
their lives easily. It just means that women are continuing to resist. And I think too, some of my sources have told me that the government knows that, you know, people are on edge, right? And so as
Mhm.
much as they can try to not create another spark, like that's kind of been the mood. But, you know, inevitably the structure still remains and there will be some type of tension that follows. But I think what's really interesting to note as well, as you mentioned, like the crackdown happened swiftly, right? So not just a crackdown on protesters being killed or being detained en masse, but even legally, the crackdown continued in Iran. So a year after the 2022 uprising,
Hmm.
passed a law, which in short is referred to as the hijab and chastity law. This was
Oh
overwhelmingly
yeah.
in parliament, right? So 152 legislators voted for it compared to 34 legislators saying no, 7 abstentions. So overwhelming support. And this law was, I mean, it's just draconian is the way to describe it. People who are repeat offenders who aren't wearing their hijab or Islamic dress code properly can face heavier fines, prison sentence of up to 15 years.
Oh my
Other
God.
punishments, yeah, I mean, and even worse, like other punishments like lashes for noncompliance or
Yeah.
loss of employment, exclusion from higher education. The list goes on. And this law even had this Orwellian aspect where it said we're going to use things like traffic cameras and AI to identify offenders.
Right.
So this shows that even legally they're trying to contain this, but the law actually was never implemented.
Oh, wasn't it?
Yeah. No, so we're still waiting to see. I mean, as of December last year, it wasn't implemented. The president of Iran, Masoud Pezeshkian, while he was running and also right before it was due to roll out, he came out and said that he doesn't support it. He publicly opposed this. Um,
Hmm.
I think women continue to stage actions in Iran, knowing full well the cost. And I think even that in and of itself gives us an insight into the reality that this movement is not gone. In December 2024, right a few days before the hijab and chastity law was expected to go into effect, we had a live performance from a singer named Parastu Ahmadi. She posted a video live on YouTube. Now she defied the, more than 40-year ban on women singing in public.
Hmm.
And she did this in defiance. And she sang, it was so moving. She sings to camera. She's in a long black dress, her hair out, her lips and fingernails are raspberry. And she, is really beautiful. She filmed this as well in an old historic archway, which showed these old roadside inns that were built along the Silk Road. So to me, she's evoking this image of our history and kind of invoking that Iran and who we are. We have existed centuries before the
Of
Islamic Republic.
course.
We will continue to exist after. And she's so defiant. And she sang protest anthems. She sang well-known songs. She was arrested and charged with conducting an illegal concert the next day. So she did this, full well and engaged in such a beautiful form of an artistic statement against repression. And so, we still continue to voice dissent against the regime. That's what Iranian women are doing.
Do we know what happened to her?
I believe her case is still pending.
Uh,
And I think it's because when, the state is really good at repression, they have a really good repression playbook essentially. But once you start to get a little bit known, it can work both
it
ways.
gets aha.
Either it can provide cover because you're so well known, your case is highlighted, or they can use that to crack down on you and say, see, you're colluding with external forces. Like it can really go both ways.
Sure. And of course, and obviously also there's some disagreement over how to cope with this in the regime itself.
I
Because
mean,
you have
I mean, you need
people coming forward and saying, well, no, this law shouldn't be put into practice, or it's they're not speaking with one voice completely.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really good point to bring up is there isn't even within the regime itself a solidified narrative, as you said, right? Like
Yeah.
Masoud Pezeshkian or the Iranian president always being out in full force against the implementation of this law versus the supreme leader, Khamenei, very much supporting this. So it's like there's always a lot of tension within the government, the different factions trying to be pragmatic, this and that. But yeah, that's definitely representative of what it looks like inside the country.
Yeah. It sounds as if everything is boiling toward some point, however near or distant, when this will explode or just create
Hmm.
circumstances for radical change. Um, you know, because all issues, as you said earlier, feed into the down to the government sooner or later. But the women's one was it was the first time. I mean, when I wrote about it here, um, I refer to it as the first contemporary, modern women's revolution because it really has been. And there were not men directing it. There were not, men were supporting it in some cases. And there were certainly male students who were arrested and who were beaten up as well. But it was primarily and substantially, and it remained for a very long time, and really, in a sense, still does, with this quiet, just just nobody's wearing a scarf. Just we're just taking matters into our own hands. Passive, but active resistance. And that's a whole new way of doing things that is uniquely feminist, I think, because it's relatively peaceful. A- and yet there were women who, the instant protests. I was gripped by those when a woman would just wearing a scarf, would suddenly leap up on a park bench and whip off her scarf for 10, 15 seconds and proclaim women life freedom and then disappear into a crowd. And these were sort of happening bang, 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 bang all over Iran. And I couldn't help grinning with delight. So there's those as well, isn't there?
Absolutely. I mean, I think too, we saw so many examples that just showed how concretely women were leading this. So not just was the country in solidarity with Gina, but you saw women putting their bodies on the line and in direct confrontation with security forces, right? You
Yeah.
saw women, as you said, taking their hijab off. I saw scenes of women who were at funerals for their loved ones who were killed protesting, cutting their hair over the casket of the protester who was killed by the state. So
Yeah.
that was really emotional to see. And even in the protest slogans, they were feminist in nature, right? I mean, there's a very common slogan that's Mikosham, Mikosham, uke baradaram kosh, I will kill or seek revenge on the person who killed my brother. That was being switched to sister. Um,
Oh,
so it's like even you could hear the clues beyond just seeing women leading and using their bodies. Like it was even
yes.
in chants, which was so moving.
Yeah, and this has not happened in the modern world. I mean, this has just literally not happened. And so it became a model for all of us, but no one else was up against the mullahs in the way that Iranian women were. And
Absolutely. I mean, so much of our society in Iran is affected and under pressure by the Islamic Republic, but women are uniquely suppressed, right? Just the rights that women
yeah.
have, even just the visual symbol of having to adhere to an Islamic dress code. That's the most obvious visual to it. But it's like, of course, women came out because they have been, under the thumb of this regime for years in a really unique way.
Yeah, and they came out also in a way that, I mean, the slogan that we heard that went international was "Women, Life, Freedom," which sort of sums it up. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful, and there were video clips taken from cameras and tiny little just iPhones or smartphones of women cutting their hair, of women dancing in the street. There was one of a woman whirling with her hair whirling and her skirt whirling and her face transformed by joy. And you could not look at this without tearing up. You just it was so beautiful. It was a really different tone of revolution that the world had not seen in a long time, if ever. And
Yeah, you know what made me specifically emotional was seeing videos of young schoolgirls,
yeah.
of these elementary or middle school, like these tiny bodies, like there was one video that I saw where there's members of the Basij, that's this paramilitary plainclothes, like volunteer force, a part of the Revolutionary Guards. And the Basij are everywhere. They're enforcing protests and they're also in schools, like making sure that people adhere to the Islamic code. But there was a Basij member that was trying to give a speech to this, I believe it was elementary school because these girls looked so small. And he was talking about, adhering to laws. And these girls just drowned him out. They started chanting bisharaf at him, which is it's a word that means shameless or without honor.
Oh,
Or a school administrator, this like large man trying to talk to them about putting their hijab on, and they're just throwing paper at him, knowing that even as a young child, you can land
yeah.
or the security forces, like they know those risks. And so it was really emotional to see that, because it just made me feel like, wow, do I really share heritage with these brave women? Like I just like felt such a connection. And then there's a part of me that was so sad, because like these young girls are putting themselves on the line at school, and like they have a level of resilience that, should a young child have this level of resilience because they were, they're living under a society where they have to have a certain toughness that I didn't have at that age in Canada. So it was really beautiful, and also like filled me with grief at the same time, if that makes
Yes, yes, of course. But they will not forget that, you know? I mean,
sense. Yeah.
they will live on and they will grow up and they will not ever forget that, and they will reenact it until it becomes real.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
it's just heartbreaking that they have to. But it's heart healing that they are embodying that right now. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And that it's women in a traditionally patriarchal society. I mean, is leadership of all of us, the global women's movement, you know. I mean, it's incredible. It's extraordinary.
Big time. I mean, and the reason that we, as the larger global audience, the only reason that we know about this story, and what happened to Gina, was because of women journalists, right? Because
Exactly.
of Niloufar Hamidi, who was at the hospital, and posted a picture of, Gina's grandmother and father in an embrace after she had passed. She put that image out into the world. Or
Right, right,
yeah,
right, right. That was what broke the story.
absolutely. And Niloufar wrote alongside, she said something like the black flag of mourning is our national flag or our national dress. She just captured that moment, even while, Niloufar was being, and all the journalists were being told not to publicize this. Like, she took that risk. And
Yeah.
Elahe Mohammadi, she went to the funeral for Gina at her hometown of Saqqez in Kurdish province, Kurdistan in Iran. Elahe took that risk and publicized what was happening, because she showed us how many people showed out, and that Gina was becoming a movement, right? And these things are very threatening to the regime. They spent over 17 months in prison. They were released on bail in January 2024. So almost like immediately after they published what had happened, they were taken.
Mm.
And they're free at the moment. There's still I've been hearing different things if there's an appeals process or not, but either way, like, we owe everything to Niloufar Hamidi and Elahe Mohammadi, everything to them.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's also interesting that this became mixed up with, both for good and ill, the Kurdish struggle. And so there were those who claimed it was all the Kurds behind it. You know, she had nothing to do with it. Uh, but but that's of course not true. It was women who were behind it, in front of it, and part of it.
Mhm.
And if the Kurds were involved, so the Kurds were involved. You know, so what's the problem with that? But the attempt to trivialize it or sideline it didn't work.
Of course.
And has just seemingly driven it underground, where it will then erupt again and continue erupting until there's a some actual movement.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, that's such a regime tactic. It's very interesting to say, oh no, this uprising is being, led by the Kurdish people. They are an
right.
armed separatist group, and it actually has nothing to do with the system, and trying to just take away the legitimacy and shape the story in a way that, like, less people could connect to it, I guess. But
Exactly.
I mean, we're all smarter than that, right? Like, we see the visuals of what's going on, and when we hear from people directly affected. So, I mean, it goes to show that the propaganda machine really failed at that. I mean, they couldn't stop what was in motion at that point, for sure.
No, and also it keeps coming up, issue after issue after issue. And if these are all separate issues, my goodness, having nothing to do, of course, with the government, uh, then how come they keep coming up with this regularity, this consistency, and this power? So you know, you can just bury your head in the sand so long, and it doesn't work anymore. So I wish for you a country that you could go back to and be free in, as well as the work that you do internationally, the fine work that you do, and this wonderful book that will be coming out, and we'll have you back on the program and talk about it in the fall, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, that sounds lovely.
Oh, that sounds fantastic to me. Thank you, Nilu, for everything that you did during the uprising and everything that you've done since. It's incredibly important. It's important to the rest of us. It's inspiring. It's riveting, and it makes your blood flow faster and your heart beat faster, and your mind begin to work in ways that you are actually proud of for a change. In this country, at this time, we need something to be proud of, and it ain't happening here, but it certainly happened in Iran there for a few moments, and will again.
Mhm. Absolutely. I mean, that's why our book is called For the Sun After Long Nights, because we do believe that there is a future to this movement, and this activism and work will continue until we are all free.
That is a beautiful title. For the sun, say it again. For the sun after a long night.
For the Sun After Long Nights.
For
The
sun.
title comes from the song Baroye by Shervin Hajipur, which became the anthem to the protests.
For the sun after long nights. Ah, it's beautiful. Thank you. How do I say thank you in Persian?
You
Or
can say merci. We took it for, yeah, we say merci often. You can use that.
all right, then merci and thank you again. And thank you for being on Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you so much.
It's time for another short break, but then I'll be right back with some fighting words. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Banned words. Those are fighting words. I thought I'd reacquaint you with some of the language that is no longer permissible under the Trump administration, to be used by various departments that he is one by one shutting down in his intense desire to basically destroy our government. So, these are words that are no longer permitted by various agencies, whether they are the Department of Agriculture or what used to be the Environmental Protection Agency, or what used to be the Department of Health, etc. Okay, let's see now. I'm just picking a few because the printed out list runs to hundreds of pages. Advocacy and advocate, anti-racism, at risk, barrier, belong and biased toward, biases, BIPOC, black. I don't know what you do if you want to say I'd like to have a pair of black pants or a little black dress. You're just screwed. Black is no longer permissible. Chest feed, breastfeed, clean energy, climate crisis, climate science, community diversity, cultural heritage, cultural sensitivity, of course DEI and DEIA and all the DEs, meaning diversity and inclusion, and disability, those are outlawed. Discrimination, outlawed. Diverse, outlawed. Diversity outlawed. Equal opportunity and equality, of course. Ethnicity, exclusion. Female and females and feminism. Outlawed. GBV, gender-based violence, and gender itself. Those are words that are outlawed. Gulf of Mexico, made it in there. Hate speech, health disparity, health equity. Historically, I don't know how that got in, but it's in. Immigrants, inclusion, inclusive, inclusivity, indigenous community, inequality, injustice, intersectional. Latinx, that drives them nuts. LGBT and LGBTQ, marginalized. Men who have sex with men, that whole phrase is in there, doubtless in the military. Mental health, minorities, multicultural, Native American. I think that's the only, no, there's black. I was going to say, I think that's the only ethnic group that made it in, but no, Latinx is in too. What am I thinking? Oppression itself as a word is in, it may not be used. People-centered care. Political. Pollution. Prejudice. Race. Racial identity, racial justice, racism. Segregation. Sense of belonging. Sex. Sexual preferences. Sexuality. Social justice. Stereotype. Systemic. Transgender. Trauma. Tribal. Unconscious bias. They don't want conscious or unconscious or any kind of conscious. Underprivileged, underrepresented, underserved, undervalued, vulnerable populations, women. Women is on this list, the word women. And also women and unrepresented peoples. So, those are all now banned words. I don't know what happens if you find yourself using one, but they're not if you're working in a government agency. That's not permissible. So there's that. Then there's this, which is the effort to revise a 2009 legal opinion known as the EPA endangerment finding, which concluded that rising greenhouse gas emissions are a danger to public health. And the finding gives the agency the authority to regulate greenhouse gas emissions, but eliminating it, which is now underway, would make it virtually impossible for the EPA to curb climate pollution from automobiles, factories, power plants, or oil and gas wells. Just not doable. Impossible. And the Trump administration, get this one, has opened the doors of the Panama Canal to BlackRock. Do you remember BlackRock? The group. Eric Prince is a cousin or a brother, I think, of Betsy DeVos, who was a cabinet member in the previous Trump administration, and BlackRock was found culpable for torture of prisoners and murder of prisoners last time Trump was in office. So BlackRock's back, and it will acquire 2 ports near the Panama Canal that have been the subject of a dispute between Trump and Panama. So that's not a good idea. Veterans are feeling the brunt of the administration's rapid push to downsize the workforce. Hegseth, our favorite Secretary of Cabinet, is moving to terminate Pentagon offices and positions that focus on preventing or responding to civilian harm during U.S. combat operations. And the IRS is preparing to shed as much as 50% of its staff, which will make its basic mission of collecting taxes Difficult, if not impossible. And then there is a crypto reserve plan. Everybody knows, sensible people know, that crypto is a great Ponzi scheme plus. I mean, a huge scam. But the prospect of using taxpayer money to stockpile cryptocurrencies in a national reserve, while it has drawn criticism from lawmakers and investors, is ongoing. And last but not least, the new head of the Food and Drug Administration division that regulates infant formula was recently a corporate lawyer defending a top formula maker from claims that its product gave rise to debilitating harm to premature babies. You know, this is extraordinary. Extraordinary. And that's, of course, without the amazing overhearing of military secrets by the hapless editor of The Atlantic. So that's all very, very special. Well, those are just some of reality intruding on our benumbed state of being. You know, you run into people at the grocery store or on the phone, and everybody says the same thing. How are you? Oh, well as can be expected. Oh, well, not so good. Well, what do you think how I am? I mean, it is a national acute depression, and it's not going away. I don't know what we're living in hope of, but me, at the moment, it's in hope of spring. Because in the garden, things go on no matter what. Nature is, in a sense, cruel because it doesn't care. But that's also, of course, what makes it so beneficent. It doesn't care. It doesn't care. It will survive. There will always be nature of some sort, of some type, somewhere. Right now, it's in the crocuses, which are iridescent. They are almost glow in the dark because they're so vibrant with their bright, bright glow, like lit from within almost, yellows and golds, and their purples that are like stained glass windows. And they come up in clumps, clump here, clump there, saucy, irreverent. I'm a crocus. What are you? They don't give a damn about Trump. They don't care about Putin. They don't mourn even for the Ukrainians, or for Gaza, or for anyone. They're just exuberant in being crocuses, or croci. And the snowdrops. They're lanky and long. They wave in the breeze. They're delicate. They're like overgrown lily of the valley. And if they were lily of the valley, they would be as redolent of perfume as lily of the valley are. But they're not. They're having enough on their hands or their petals to be as tall as they are, poking above the snow. They're so lovely. But also I was thinking of the way in which they leave the earth. They crack the surface of the earth, these tiny, fragile, extraordinarily willowy, bendable beings, and yet they crack the surface of a frozen earth to break through. They crack the gunk that has assembled there. They crack the leaves and the detritus and the branches and the broken parts of things that litter the garden in the winter. And they make it through, drawn by the light, drawn by the warmth, drawn by spring. And maybe that's what you and I have to do. Drawn by the light. Drawn by the spring. And ignore banned words. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on social media at The Robin Morgan. You can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net, and you can find my new novel, Parallax, and my just-out new book of poems, Harvesting Darkness, wherever books are sold. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer, as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer for this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us next time on Women's Media Center Live.